Well, hello, friends. Today we're spreading a little bit of joy with this bright and colorful Christmas centerpiece. We're doing the tablescape, we're doing this runner, we're doing this beautiful joy installation on the wall, all of that. Let's get started. So we're getting started with some garnet paint. You can buy whatever color you want. I just liked the garnet, and voila, painted the wood letters that we picked up. Now this is the estate sale wreath that we had purchased a couple months ago, but it needs fluffing. So here, I just wanted to show you visually, like, the importance of fluffing and the impact it can make. Look how big the side that I fluffed versus the side that I didn't fluff. Huge difference, right? So it's worth spending the extra minute or two and just handling as many of the branches, if not all of them, that you can. It goes a long way. So now that everything's fluffed, we need to start making the wreath because it's going up on the wall. Now, I know I want to use the champagne. I'm going to have this fabric that you see here on the table. So the champagne is going to help brighten things up. I went back and forth between the textured ribbon that I had and then this like velvet finish that I picked up at that same estate sale. And I have this jumbo one as well, but I decided that's way too big for the proportions of this wreath. But what do? I have all these like wired pieces that I could put in, but I decided we're going to keep it simple. I'm not going to use the burgundy wired cabling. I am just going to stick with this nice burgundy velvet finish that I have because it's a really, really nice quality, and I got it from that estate sale, so I'm assuming that lady was buying good stuff. So I'm going to need to make the bow first because that's kind of our centerpiece. So I'm going to bust out my Bodabra, and then I have these trim ties that I picked up on after clearance Christmas like a couple years ago from Michael's that I haven't really used, but I thought this would be a great use for them. And it's gold and it's got a nice texture. So this isn't really going to be seen per se, but I want to prepare it like it's going to just in case, but I think it's going to help secure that much better to the wreath. So like normal with the Bodabra, you need to take a piece of wire, fold it in half, creating a loop at one end, and then two ends at the other, and then you just tuck it underneath, and this is what helps keep the bow nice and secure when you're done and snug together. Don't skip this step. You will regret it. Alright, so we're going to go kind of slow here at the beginning and then speed it up, because if you haven't seen any of the Bodabra tutorials on the internet, it's pretty much the same repetitive process. It just depends on what you want for your look. So always starting with the tail, and I did not measure my tail. I just knew I wanted it to be nice and kind of dangly, and you can always trim it down later. So I put a piece of burgundy, and then I went ahead and took a piece of champagne, and they are not exactly the same length, and that's okay. This can create that nice layered look later, but the tails always go in first, and you want the nice side, or the side that you want to see facing upwards towards you. Now I went ahead and put my trim tie in because I want that kind of nestled in the back of my bow to help better attach to the wreath form when we're done. So we're starting our loops. And just like with most Bodabra processes, you just twist and leave a little tail, which you won't be able to see. It'll get mixed in. And then it's really just twist and fold, twist and fold. So I'm going to go slow here, but then we'll speed it up. So you see how we twisted it? We're folding it down. And so essentially the bottom half of each loop, the back side of the ribbon should be facing up. So in this instance, we have this really nice kind of crinkled, it's not really crinkled, but it crinkles gold finish with the burgundy on top. And then we just folded it over, and boom, we're just making sure we're lining it up, and then we're twisting it. And now with the first set of loops that you do, it's imperative that you check and see if they are about the same length. They don't have to be perfectly matching, but you want to fold them up, see like that, and see, okay, we can see one's a little bit bigger than the other. And this is because when you make your additional loops going forward, however many that may be, you're going to want them to all be around that same size. So then we didn't cut that ribbon, we just pushed it off to the side, and then now we're going to add the champagne glitter ribbon. This ribbon is from Hobby Lobby, and it is wired, but it doesn't have the same strength and sturdiness. It doesn't hold its form as well as the other ones, but it still gets the job done. So we're just going to keep twisting, and this one's a lot easier to twist and fold, and see how we see the bottom of that ribbon. And then now, boop, ta-da, we got a bow. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up because I think you guys get the gist of it. What I do want to iterate at this point is, at this point, you can make as many or as few bows as you would like. It's your wreath. You do what you want. I went ahead and layered back and forth between the two ribbons, and you can see, just like the other bow that I made for my tree topper, you don't have to cut the ribbon in between each one. You just pull the ribbon off to the side, and then you pull that other ribbon in, and just like that. See? You just pull it off to the side, and then you just pick up where you left off. And so I like that alternating look. But if you wanted all the same color, or you wanted to add even more different textures in with different ribbons, you could go right ahead. I think for the look I was going for, I wanted something simple and kind of classic, and so for me, this is a good combination. And the number of bows, like I said, or loops, doesn't really matter, but like you can see I got towards the end of the roll, and so I decided, okay, well, I don't have enough to make equal number of loops if they're full size, so we'll just make a few small ones, and that's perfectly fine. We just know that when we have the smaller loops, we don't want to put the bigger loops on top of them, so the smaller loops are going to be more like front and center, if that makes sense. So that's why when we go in again with the champagne ribbon, we just go in, and then we're going to make equally, or not equally, but we're going to make small bows as well, or small loops here. See, so it's about the same if we wanted to. I went ahead and just cut it as a little tail, and then we can just make like the littlest tiny loop, boop, and that's all there is to it. Now, this next part is really important. You need to take the little tool that comes with this bow dabra and just smush everything down while it's still in the form. It's very important. And then the end of the wires, so right there at the bottom where the two wires are, you take both of those two wire ends, and then we're going to loop them through the whole, literally the loop that we made earlier, and this is what's going to help keep everything nice and secure. So you're going to go ahead, you're going to push those through, and then make sure everything's lined up, and then pull really, 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 really tight, keeping everything in the bow dabra. And this might take a few, a little bit extra effort just to push everything down, but you want to leave it in the bow dabra as long as possible. And then don't smush it super hard like I did. It kind of gets a little distorted, but then you split the wires, and you can do this, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I like to split the wires and then twist them together in the very, very, very back of the bow as such. And this is what's going to help keep everything nice and secure together, but there's still plenty of room on the wires to attach to the wreath form. Plus, I literally pushed in the gold wire trims, so we're going to have like extra secure bow here. So now these are those little bow ends and tails that we started with, or we ended with, excuse me. So we can roll them, but honestly, once the bow is fluffed out, you're not going to see them if you fluff it right. So we start fluffing, and I try to rotate a little bit so the colors aren't necessarily always touching in next to each other, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. So do the best that you can, or if you don't care, just leave them there. But I like to try to spread the colors out so we have some of the, like the champagne mixed in with all of the burgundies that we have. But if you're using all one color, it doesn't really matter. Just try and, whatever you do to one side, try and do to the other so it's loosely proportionate. Now, fluff it out as best you can, but don't worry about getting it perfect, because it's going to get a little smushed when you put on the wreath here in a second. But you just need to get the general shape going so you can eyeball some of the next steps going. So don't, like I said, don't worry about getting every single thing perfect, unless you really want to. Then you carry on. And you can see how I'm leaving the gold trim ties like that out to the side, because we're going to use those to attach. So if you work those into yours, just leave them out. We'll deal with them in a minute. We have our wreath form, and we're just going to let the bow sit here for a minute so we can kind of get a visual image of how big the bow is, and so that way we know what we need to work with while we're decorating the rest of the wreath form. Now, I know I want to keep this kind of simple and classic, so I am just going to just start with my champagne ribbon because it's already worked into everything else, and I have it out, and it's going to look perfect and coordinate everything together. Now I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I think everybody here can make some loops, because that's really all you're doing. You don't have to overcomplicate this. You're just making loops and using the wire that is already in these wreath forms to secure it. Now you can try and go kind of like a crisscross, so let's say you lean towards the left on one loop, on the next loop you go a little bit towards the right. There is no necessarily wrong way to do it. It just depends on the look that you're going for. I know that I'm going to be using 2 ribbons in here, so we're going to essentially be creating kind of a herringbone type effect. Some small tips I will say is, when you're in doubt, add a little extra ribbon to each loop for a better poof. You can always tighten that up later if you need to, but it's harder to make it more poofy. So when you're making your loops each go around, add a little extra. See how it's got that nice shape to it, because we don't want the loops to be super tight against the bristles. We want them to have a little bit extra poof to them. Now we're going to grab our bow and say, okay, it's not quite going to fit in that space, so we're going to make just one more tiny loop just for making it a little bit more polished looking. And this one doesn't have to be perfect. We know that the bow is going to cover most of it, but we still want those details. Now when I start my second ribbon, in this instance it's more of the burgundy, you see how I started it in the middle of one of the existing loops. This is creating kind of like I'll say like a herringbone, but it's kind of a herringbone, it's kind of crossing, but this is just creating more visual texture. And so not only are we going from, let's say, like the half of the loop over, we're also crossing a little bit. And there's no perfect reason, like this whole thing isn't going to be perfectly symmetrical like nothing in nature is, but we're just trying to create some visual interest. That's all we're doing, so keep that in mind. Now it's super easy to add this pretty bow. We're going to take the little silver wires and attach those to the front part of the wreath through some of the little bristles that are already in the wreath, and then we're going to go ahead and take the gold form, which I know you can't see, but we attach that in. Now that's hung, we're going to go ahead and work on the table. So I have my green linen that we've previously used earlier this year ready to go, and I have this sheet that I picked up at Goodwill that's like the perfect shade of burgundy with a kind of a glossy finish. So that is too short to go from floor length to floor length, so I'm cutting it in half and I'm going to sew it so that we make it super long and a little bit more narrow. And part of the reason I'm doing this ahead of time is because I know that I want this to be the part of the tablescape that touches the garland. Since this is already a little snagged, I don't want to snag my green tablecloth, but everything else is ready to go. So we got our letters up, we have this beautiful joy up there, we have our tree ready to go. And so now I went ahead, I put my green tablecloth on and our newly poorly sewn updated runner, which is essentially just the bed sheet cut in half, and then you can see where I sewed it in the middle. But I want to point out that if you're using a rosette table linen or anything that might snag, be very careful and have something on top of it. In this instance, our runner that we're going to be adjusting to when we put these garlands on, because they snag on everything, because that's what they do. Now you can see how the side we just looked at was fluffed out and this side isn't fluffed out. This is going to be a lot more of a pain in the butt, so make sure you fluff. It's very helpful. Alright, everything is fluffed from one end to the other. It's all going to be easy to work with. And speaking of fluffs, here's our fluffy Wally, our baby Moose. And Wally's been here helping me, and Moose is upset that he is hogging the ball, so he's just going to go ahead and take that ball like a nincompoop. And even though his brother's been sleeping and cuddling on it, he's the annoying little brother through and through. So as we start with this ribbon, I'm starting from the very table center, which you can also tell from the seam that I sewed, and we're going to do one piece of ribbon to the left and one piece of ribbon to the right. Now I'm starting again with the champagne in the bottom, just because that's how I started with my wreath, and so I want it to be kind of consistent. So we're just tucking the tail end in this instance down, just because I don't want any unfinished ends showing, and this is going to be a lighter garland center piece. It's not going to be as heavily filled. Now, one thing we didn't mention before is the lights that are on the garland. I just happen to have these. I thought they're just the right brightness to kind of be a subtle addition. They're not super obnoxious or anything, so I'm leaving them in. If you have any kind of fairy lights, those are going to work great. But yes, make your loops similar length to what you did in the wreath if you're going that far. And then I made sure to take mine all the way to the floor, so that way it's a complete cascading look. Now that's all one piece of ribbon, so I need to do the same on the other side. And after we do that, we need to make sure that we get our burgundy with gold backing ribbon on next, and we're going to do pretty much the same process of what we did before, where we're kind of crisscrossing a little bit. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's a combination of formula in the sense of, okay, we're going to the middle of this one to the middle of that one and crossing, but on the other hand, if it doesn't look right or the wire just isn't bending in that direction and it's not going to look as flattering, do what makes sense and looks good, because you're the one who's going to have to enjoy it. So you might as well think it looks good as well, as opposed to trying to follow a specific formula. So we went ahead, and I'm not going to show you guys the entire play-by-play of this because I think you know how to do this at this point, and if not, you should do it anyways. It's really easy. Once you get some momentum going, you're going to be golden. And I will say, with wired ribbon, it's very forgiving, so you can do it, undo it, redo it, and then all of a sudden you've got this nice cascading look. Now I didn't have the burgundy go all the way to the floor because I wanted to kind of have that champagne moment towards the bottom, and I thought it was kind of a nice layered effect to have it kind of staggered like a stepping stone. And this stuff sheds like crazy, or at least my older garland does, so I am going to get all of the little pieces off and cleaned up, and we can start gathering. Alright, so what we're doing is essentially taking our fingers and creating like a pinching, almost like a paper fan, if you're doing something like that, and that's essentially what we're doing to create these little pleats. Now, since I'm a terrible sewer, I made sure to tuck the seams on the ends in underneath at the very bottom so you don't see any seams. Now, whether you have seams or not that are professionally done, typically I would suggest making sure those seams are tucked underneath so you only see essentially pleats. Right, because we don't want to see the seams, and so we're going to keep going back and forth, and there's no perfect way to do this as far as I'm concerned. When I'm working on it like this, we're doing it in little sections. I will say the more you touch it, the more frustrated you're going to get, so simple is easier. Now we get loosely what we want here. I make sure to make it a little bit wider than my garland, so that way I can always tuck it under the garland, but as I'm laying the garland, I want to have a little extra space to work with. Now watch this. See what's happening? I went to the end of the table and just kind of pulled it delicately. Boom, evens it out so nicely, and that's a trick you can do again and again even when the garland is down. So see how I put the garland down, and we need to rearrange the garland a little bit. We have plenty of room on the runner element of this, so the garland never touches the table, and so therefore doesn't snag on our nice rosette linen. So just a little tip, make the garland a little bigger initially, and then you can shrink it in later and then go back and do that same effect at the end. Now what you can't see, but I wanted to leave in, is you have to fluff and finish your edges. That's important. Candles are ready. These are from my friends at Shop Wild Things, and they are battery operated, so I can't burn the house down. Whee! I love this kind of creamy color because it looks beautiful and natural with the champagne, and because they're LED, I don't have to worry about them setting anything on fire if they're a little off, so I can go ahead and just literally use the wires built into this garland to just twist them into place, and that's it. If you don't have a lot of wire left, you can put little candle holders in and they will look gorgeous. Aren't they so great? Thanks again to Shop Wild Things for sending me these to work with. So remember my white poinsettias from last year? Well, I am using them again in the centerpiece because they have beautiful champagne edging of this nice tiny micro glitter. So these are so perfect because they have short stems, so you just fluff them out, and then I did rotate 3 of them. I did one on either side and then went back to the original side, so left, right, or right, left, right, depending which way you're looking at it, and because they're so big, you don't need a lot of them. And just as a little added extra, you can only see it on each side just for a moment, but I added little clusters of ornaments just for a little something. So Joy is on the wall. It looks beautiful, champagne, burgundy, all the greatness. And so that's translated into the tree. But what I wanted to remind you guys was the tree skirt is not really a skirt. It's the sequins tablecloth that we cut last year for Valentine's Day. And then I just put a burgundy wrap over it that was nice and sheer, and it muted the bright red sequins, and now it looks really beautiful with this tree. I apologize, these darn lights do not like being recorded and they go all sorts of crazy with my phone, but in person it's a beautiful burgundy and champagne tree. And everything comes together. It's a really unusual combination. It's very bright, very merry, with some of the traditional elements like champagne and the garland, but then deep burgundies and the whites and of course the bright green rosette tablecloth. Like, how can we not talk about that? But I like this. It's a very different Christmas theme, but it's still fun, and it definitely has some classic elements to it. It's just with a different twist on it. I don't want to say modern, but just a different twist. So I hope you guys have found a little bit of joy in this project. I know I did. Make sure to subscribe for more Christmas content.